we stop weapons necessary to destroy the enemies of the state of Israel at a time of great peril, we will pay a price. This is obscene. It is absurd. Give Israel what they need to fight the war they can't afford to lose.
I think it's a new definition of what ironclad means when we think about when the president says that his support for Israel is ironclad, because according to that new definition, what the American officials have been saying now on the record, right? They're not hiding it. They're not saying it with unnamed officials. They're saying it, President Biden himself on CNN, Defense Secretary Lloyd Austin before the Senate. What they're explaining is that, yeah, our ironclad support exists, but it exists to give Israel the means to defend itself with. And when we talk about defense, that's Iron Dome. But any capability that will allow Israel to be able to attack and go on the offense is something that the Americans are now saying we don't want to give Israel. We don't want to give Israel the bombs that it would need to continue to fight a war, which is also part of its defense. We don't want to give Israel artillery shells that it would need to be able to fight that same war. And what we're seeing is this collision course, I think, to a large extent, that Israel and America have been on since almost the very beginning of this war. Let's remember that there were serious differences between the way that the Americans perceived the way Israel should carry out its operations and the way that Israel thought that it should carry out its operations, have now really come to I would say, a new height in the way that they are exploding in front of our eyes and really showcasing the tension between our two countries and causing severe damage, I would say, to the security of the state of Israel. I would argue to the long-term security of the United States of America. And letting down an ally in this way is not something that is quickly forgotten. The Israeli government is definitely furious. We've seen a series of tweets and messages that have come out from Israeli government ministers. The prime minister has, for most part, been quiet. But you have people who talk, ministers, like, far-right ministers like Itamar Ben-Gvir, who says Hamas, who tweeted earlier, Hamas loves Biden. You had the foreign minister, Israel Katz, who tweeted earlier that Israel will do whatever it takes, no matter what. No one will stop us. In the IDF, there's definitely great concern. Beyond the political rhetoric, for the military, this is the realization to some extent of a nightmare. Because let's remember that the Israeli military is extremely closely connected to the U.S. military, is reliant almost completely on U.S. military platforms. The entire Air Force consists of American-made aircraft, F-15s, F-16s, F-35s, Blackhawks, Apaches, Longbows, C-130s, Boeing refueling jets. Everything is American in that, and therefore Israel needs two primary deliveries when it comes to Air Force. One, spare parts. Two, the bombs that it uses for those aircraft. Not to mention the intelligence sharing, other cooperation, what we saw on the night that Iran attacked Israel and how there was that regional collective led by the Americans that helped intercept those missiles and drones. There is a close relationship here that the IDF will be very concerned that something will happen and it will undermine the relationship and the alliance between those two countries. The Israeli people, I think, are dumbfounded, are not understanding what it is that the Americans want, why they would do something like this. What do they expect of Israel when at a time they say don't go into Rafah, but then rockets and mortars are fired from Rafah and kill 4 Israeli soldiers just a few days ago? They say don't go to war in the north against Hezbollah, but we've had for 7 months over 100,000 people dislocated from their homes. We've created a buffer zone inside our own territory, and Hezbollah continues to bombard Israel every single day. So it's either a complete misunderstanding of foreign policy, or it's an abandonment of the state of Israel. And that is something that the Israeli people say, this is our closest ally. It's a tough moment for, I think, Israel. I mean, you don't have to be the most sophisticated foreign policy professional or analyst to understand that when you have two sides that are in a battle, and you have what is believed to be the world superpower that is supposed to be standing with one side, that is constantly and consistently throughout the conflict saying to that side, in this case, Israel, stop, don't do it, don't go, don't, give more aid, allow more, ease up restrictions more, be easier, be better, and not demanding the same of Hamas. Is why would Hamas give up the hostages? Why would Hamas stop attacking Israel? Why would Hamas disarm? Why would it, deconstruct its military and its terrorist infrastructure? It sees, and its strategy has long been accurate, right? That the world will stop Israel. And that was what Hamas gambled on from October 7th until today. When it crossed into Israel, massacred 1,200 people, kidnapped 250 more, and continued to attack Israel. What Hamas has long believed is that Israel will do whatever it wants. And this is, by the way, part of its strategy. Israel will go into Gaza. We'll put our civilians as human shields. That's what the Palestinians do. Israel will kill some of those civilians, even though Israel has done a fantastic job, in my view, of distinguishing and of really having possibly the lowest combatant to civilian death ratio in modern military history. But that is the MO, the modus operandi of Hamas, is for Israel to do that. And then Hamas says, yeah, and the world will stop it. Well, it's been proven right. And there is an alternative. The alternative would have been for the Americans, for the Europeans, for the British, for everyone to say, look at Israel, how it's fighting this war in a way that has never been fought before, how it's doing what any of us would do to defend itself and to get its people back, how it makes no sense that we should make demands of Israel and turn the Israeli Defense Forces, the IDF, into the Israel delivery of services to Hamas force, which is basically what the military has been doing over the last few months, is giving supplies all the time to Hamas. So to sustain it, to give it fuel, to give it supplies, so the leaders of Hamas can stay in their tunnels and stay alive, basically. And to say to Israel, instead of stop, keep going, because we would do the same and we support your right to take down this violent terrorist organization, which the Defense Secretary of the United States said in the Senate that he doesn't doubt that they would try to do again, just like they said they would, if they could. So there was an alternative to the way that the Americans and everyone else in the world could have spoken to Israel. But unfortunately, they are not doing that. And that totally emboldens Hamas and other terrorist groups around the world. There's no question, I think, that Israel has really done a remarkable job, and military experts as well, like John Spencer, Richard Kemp, and others have said that the Israeli military has really done a remarkable job in distinguishing and in keeping down the collateral damage and civilian casualties. And just to give our listeners and viewers a sense, if we accept the Hamas numbers of just over 30,000 people who have been killed, we should accept, because that's a terrorist group, we should accept the Israeli numbers, which talk about half of them almost being combatants. So we have a 1-to-1 ratio. For every combatant killed, or for every civilian killed, a combatant killed. According to the United Nations, in military conflicts in urban areas like Gaza, the numbers are 9-to-1. If you look at recent American wars in Iraq and Afghanistan, you're looking at 5-to-1, 3-to-1. Israel is breaking all those records. Now, we should, to some extent, the world should be lining up and applauding what the IDF has been doing. I don't expect them to do that. But they should be laying off the pressure and giving Israel the room to continue to prosecute this war, which is in everyone's interest. The reason I think that Rafah is of another scale is twofold. Number one, there are external factors here. The world has lost interest. The world has lost patience. President Biden is going into a very difficult election against President Trump. Every vote counts. There are politics that matter here for the Americans. And it's been 7 months, and people want this war over to be able to move on to something else in the world. It's taking up a lot of bandwidth for the Americans and for the Biden administration, as well as for other governments around the world, not to mention what's happening here in Israel. There's no question that the Israeli people are also stuck in time since October 7th. But there's something else that's happening here in Rafah specifically, is that there is a huge number of displaced Palestinians who have gone to Rafah, right? When Israel first went in the war, it went in from the north and pushed everyone down south and gave them time to move. So a lot of those people moved down south. Now, the people who are in Rafah, about 1 million who are not from that area, need somewhere to go. Now, we heard from the Vice President of the United States, Kamala Harris, that they don't have where to go. Well, they actually do have where to go, because last I checked on a map, Gaza in the south, Rafah has a border with Egypt. They could go into Egypt, or they could move north, where Israel has pretty much pulled out of. So there is where to go, but I think that huge number of civilians does raise a lot of concern. But I would probably say is that what it is just they're fed up. They want this war over in America. They have bigger fish to fry in terms of, winning the election, at least for the Biden folks. And that is taking the priority over. I'll tell you what one top Democrat explained to me. Everything pales in comparison for Joe Biden when it comes to the most important priority, and that is defeating Donald Trump. So if throwing Israel under the bus to an extent is what will help Biden defeat Donald Trump, that is what he will do, and that is what he is doing. Because there's no doubt that Israel, when it looks at its borders and it looks at the different fronts that it faces, and Israel today is the country that is most attacked in the world with 5 active fronts: Hamas in Gaza, Hezbollah in Lebanon, Iran itself, which most recently attacked Israel, the Houthis, and of course, terrorism in the West Bank. And all of that together, Israel does need a strong ally in the United States. It needs the continued delivery and supply of spare parts, of weapons. It needs diplomatic cover and support. So this is something that will definitely give the government pause as it considers what its next moves are. And even if those warehouses are currently full of munitions and supplies, if there is going to be a larger war, can Israel today rely on the Biden administration to supply Israel with what it would need to prosecute a larger regional war with Hezbollah or with Iran or whoever it might be? So definitely it is something that Israel needs to think about. But will it change policy? There, I'm not sure it will, because Rafah has to be dealt with. We cannot forget that there are 15,000 armed Hamas men in Rafah. There are 4 battalions. There are tunnels that are used along the border with Egypt to bring in weapons, up until recently, sophisticated weapons that Hamas brings in from Egypt. It would be like telling the world that you have to stop World War II on the verge of entering Berlin because we don't want to take down, and give the Nazis the right to continue and another day to live and to fight on. It's like when the coalition fought against ISIS in 2017 and was in Mosul. You go through all of Mosul and you say, no, but we're stopping at the Bab Atwab neighborhood of Mosul because there it's a little too difficult. And ISIS is on the verge of being destroyed to an extent. That's where we are right now. This is not the time to handcuff Israel. It's the time to give Israel the greater support so it can get done what it needs for its security and what the entire region recognizes, except for, of course, Iran and Assad and Hezbollah. But the moderate Arab Sunni states all recognize that this is in their interest also for Israel to win and to take down Hamas. Yahya Sinwar, wherever he is, whatever tunnel he's holding himself up in, he is looking at this and he's probably smiling and laughing right now. And the reason being is that he believes what he has long believed, that he has time and he does not have to worry, and that the world will do the job for him. And that is the greatest mistake of this policy, because what it does is it emboldens Sinwar, Mohammed Def, the other Hamas leaders, to believe that that they can do not only what they did on October 7th, but that they can get away with it. And that is something that needs to change, because unfortunately, what we've seen around the world is that what begins here with attacks against Israel is something that then does spread and does continue. Radical Islam does not stop at the gates of Gaza. It continues to other places and other countries.